Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Today we're going to be discussing the new gift mechanic from Bloomburrow. Although it's pretty simple conceptually, there are a few interactions that can lead to situations with non-obvious answers. Fortunately, sorting these out is generally pretty tame once you understand exactly how the mechanic functions. Ready? Let's get started. Before we get too deep into the details, let's quickly go through conceptually how this mechanic works. If you're casting a spell that has the gift mechanic, then you have the option of promising a gift to a specific opponent as you're casting that spell. If you promise the gift, the spell will have extra effects for you, but the opponent you chose will get some benefit also. Right out of the gate, we can see that this mechanic scales very well for multiplayer formats, since if you offer a gift, you still get all the same benefits for yourself, but only one opponent gets a gift. Now, let's take a look at exactly how it functions under the hood. We said that if you're casting a gift spell, you have the option of promising an opponent a gift. As you can see, the way that this works is that the gift mechanic gives the spell an optional additional cost, which is to choose an opponent. Let's observe a couple of important consequences of this. Notice that it did not say the word target. This means that even if your opponent has hexproof, you could still promise a gift to that player, and they would get it just fine. It also means that promising a gift does not count as committing a crime or for any other effects that specifically key off of targeting. Of course, some gift spells do have targets in other parts of their effects, and those would interact with hexproof and crimes and such just the same way as normal, but promising the gift itself does not count. Now, another important feature of the way that this works is that choosing an opponent to receive a gift is an optional additional cost. You might think of the cost as being that your opponent gets a food or a card draw or whatever the gift is, and that's an okay description from a flavorful or conceptual way to think about it, but as far as the rules are concerned, the actual cost is just to choose an opponent. The part where they get the food or the treasure or whatever the gift happens is later, and that means that if it's countered, then the gift that you promised doesn't happen either. The fact that this is an additional cost has another important consequence, that being that it's compatible with any way that you're casting the spell. It doesn't matter if you're casting a gift spell normally, or via a Ragavan, or if you cascade into it, or if you're casting it without paying its mana cost via an Omniscience. Anytime that you're casting a gift spell, you can promise a gift. A downside of this is that when you're casting a gift spell, you can only promise one gift. You cannot give multiple players the gift, nor give the same gift multiple times to get extra effects. Many gift spells require different targets depending on whether the gift was promised or not. If you're familiar with the process for casting a spell, you know that the step where you declare targets is actually before the one where you pay costs. And the way this works is that when you're casting a gift spell, you have to first declare whether you're going to offer a gift. Then you choose the targets, and then afterwards you pay the gift cost by choosing a specific opponent if applicable. Perhaps related to this technical detail, the opponent that you give the gift to is not necessarily related to the player or players who are targeted or otherwise affected by other aspects of the spell. So, for example, Amy could play a Longstalk Brawl and gift Nick a fish while fighting one of Olive's creatures. Now that we have that set, we can take a look at precisely how the gifting part works. This is actually different depending on what type of card that you're using. For instants and sorceries, the gift will be given as part of their resolution. For permanents, these have an ability that triggers when they enter the battlefield, and the gift will happen as part of that ability's resolution. All instant and sorcery spells with gift specify in their reminder text that the gift happens before any of the other effects, and there's actually a rule that specifies this is the case also. This actually kind of came as a surprise to me because normally instructions on a spell are performed in the order that they're written, and all the gift spells have gift written first. So strictly speaking, I don't know what purpose this rule has other than potentially causing headaches if there's ever some other keyword ability that also wants to be the first instruction to be performed. If anyone in the comments has any ideas, I'd love to hear about them. The other interesting thing is that with permanent spells that have a gift, these don't actually work the same way. Recall that permanent spells have a triggered ability that triggers when the permanent enters, that gives the gift to the opponent. This triggered ability works just like any other, meaning that if the permanent has any other ETB abilities, that permanent's controller can stack them in any order. Therefore, if you play a scrap shooter, you can have it destroy your opponent's artifact before they get to draw a card. You could also choose to have these happen in the other order too, but that risks them drawing a spell that could make their artifact indestructible, which would be pretty embarrassing. By the way, if you check the wording on Scrap Shooter or any of the other gift permanents with similar ETB abilities, you'll see that the check on if the gift was promised is worded as an intervening if clause. That means that these abilities do not trigger at all unless the gift was actually promised. The same thing is actually true for the ability that gives the gift to the opponents, even though the reminder text somewhat confusingly does not use the intervening if template. Now, because the triggered abilities that give the gift are normal triggered abilities just like any other, they can also interact with other effects that look for triggered abilities. So for example, they could be suppressed or doubled by an Elishnorn. All of the token-related gifts would be doubled by Primal Vigor also. And it's pretty straightforward to see how they would interact with something like Mondrak. But what about this Fisher's Talent? If you gift a fish while you control a maxed out Fisher's Talent, are you essentially gifting an octopus? Well, if you're just going off the English meaning of that phrase, it sort of looks like if Amy was to gift Nick a fish, then Amy would create a fish under Nick's control. However, if you look here, you can see that officially Nick is the one who's instructed to create that fish. Therefore, Amy's Fisher's Talent would not do anything at all here. If Nick had one, though, that could upgrade his gift substantially. Read these token-altering replacement effects carefully, though, because there are many slightly different templates, and the effect on the answer can be very significantly different between them. Now, that last scenario brought up an interesting point. What if you promise a gift, but it doesn't happen? Like in that last example, Amy promised a tapped fish, but Nick got a tapped octopus. Does that affect anything? And the answer is no. The gift cards have their extra effects worded if the gift was promised. And that phrase is defined to mean if the spell's controller declared an intention to pay the gift cost as the spell was cast. Remember that the gift cost is just choosing an opponent, so there's no problem if you promise a gift but then can't deliver on it. For the same reason, if you choose an opponent in a multiplayer game, but that opponent isn't in the game by the time the gift spell resolves, you still did promise a gift, so you still get the benefits even though it's impossible for the gift to be delivered. This ruling applies equally as well to any cases where you promise a gift of a card to an opponent who's under some effect that says they can't draw cards. Remember, it's against the rules to choose to do something illegal, but you're not choosing to have your opponent draw a card here. You're choosing them as an opponent as an additional cost to cast a spell that will instruct that player to draw a card if the spell resolves. Totally different as far as the game is concerned. For more details, check out my video on Cloudhoof Kieran versus Glimpse the Unthinkable. Now, when I was looking for questions related to this mechanic, there was one thing that I saw come up over and over again. What happens if you copy a gift spell? Well, recall that when you copy a spell, you copy all the decisions that were made during the casting of that spell. Therefore, a copy of a gift spell has the same opponent chosen for it as the original. It is not possible to copy a gift spell and only promise a gift for the original, but not the copy, or vice versa. Nor is it possible to copy a gift spell and promise a gift to one player with the original and a different player with the copy. On the other hand, if you copy a permanent with a gift ability, like with this clone here, then when the clone enters the battlefield, the game needs to decide whether the gift ETB ability will trigger. Unfortunately, copying permanents does not work the same way as copying spells. There's no rule that says that you copy all the decisions that you made that get copied over. You did not promise a gift with the clone spell because that spell doesn't even have the gift ability at all. Therefore, you would not get the benefit even if you did promise a gift with the original creature. Another thing I see a lot of in general is people asking about the specific timing of various types of interactions. So I thought it might be a good exercise to go through all of the official steps of casting and resolving one of these gift spells in order. So let's say that Amy wanted to cast this Sazakap's Brew. After moving it to the stack, she first has to declare whether she is going to pay the gift cost or not. Remember, she isn't actually picking an opponent here, just announcing whether she's going to pick an opponent. Then she will choose the targets. Depending on her choice in the previous step, that might be just a player, or it might be a player and a creature. After that, the game calculates the cost to cast this spell. The spell definitely has a cost of 1 and a red and discarding a card, and it might also have the gift cost, in other words, for Amy to choose an opponent. After calculating the cost, Amy can then activate some mana abilities, and then the next step is for Amy to actually pay the cost that was calculated. Officially, she can pay these in any order, so she could choose an opponent before or after she discards a card or pays the mana. I couldn't think of any reason why this choice might make a difference here, but maybe someone else in the comments can. After the total cost is paid, the spell is cast, and when it resolves, the first step will be for the opponent who has chosen to create a tapped fish token if applicable. Then, the targeted player will draw 2 cards, and then, again, if applicable, the targeted creature will get +2/+0. And that's what the full process would look like. Wow, that is a lot of information. Let's cool down with some challenge questions to test your understanding. First, Amy controls Jolly Gerbils, and she plays this Parting Gust targeting Nick's grizzly bears, promising him a gift. Then Nick counters the Parting Gust. Does Amy get to draw a card from her Jolly Gerbils ability? And the answer is no. Amy promised a gift, but she did not give one, so the Jolly Gerbils does not trigger. This ability only triggers when either an instant or sorcery gift spell whose gift cost was paid resolves, or when a gift-triggered ability from a permanent Amy controls resolves. Next up, let's say that Amy has a Longstock Brawl and she really needs to put a +1/+1 counter on her grizzly bears, but there's no other creatures in play. Can she cast the Brawl, gift her opponent the fish, and then have the bear fight the fish token? And the answer here is no. The gift does not get delivered until the spell is resolving. Therefore, it is not possible to target the fish while you're casting Longstock Brawl. Well, what about this? Amy casts a Valley Rally, and she gifts Nick a food. Nick then casts a Doomblade, destroying the creature that Amy wanted to give first strike to. What happens? Well, when the game tries to have Valley Rally resolve, it will find that all of the targets for the spell have become illegal. Therefore, Valley Rally will be put into Amy's graveyard, and none of its effects will happen. Nick will not get a food, and Amy's remaining creatures will not get +2/+0. And let's close out with just one more. Amy controls Yarok the Desecrated, and she casts a Kidnap against Nick's grizzly bears without promising the gift. How many stun counters are put on the grizzly bears? Well, Kidnap has a triggered ability that triggers when it enters the battlefield, so Yarok will make it trigger an additional time. Tapping the creature twice won't do much, but putting 3 more stun counters on it certainly will. I hope Amy isn't planning on attacking for at least the next 6 turns. And that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.